In this video I'm going to be talking about 3 TV sitcoms that got a lot of negative attention because people thought they were offensive. We'll explore why these shows caused such a stir. 2 of them were just pilot episodes and never actually became full-blown series. And one show, even though it was finished, was cancelled before it was even aired in the UK. Let's dive in. 2 people arrive on the shoreline somewhere in Britain. They've travelled from Pakistan believing life will be better in Britain, although they will claim to be from Amsterdam. This is the pilot episode of The Melting Pot that aired on the 11th of June 1975 as part of the BBC Comedy Playhouse series. This doomed BBC sitcom was written by Spike Milligan and his regular collaborator Neil Shand. It starred Milligan as Mr. Van Gogh and John Bird as Mr. Rembrandt, a Pakistani father and son who are illegal immigrants in London. Even during production, Milligan commented, "It's guaranteed to offend everybody." He was certainly right, and people have been offended by the show ever since. They travel to a district of London known as the Melting Pot and find accommodation at a boarding house run by Irish Republican coalman Paddy O'Brien, played by Frank Carson, and his voluptuous South African raised daughter Nefertiti Sopinski. The other boarders are a black Yorkshireman changed to a black Brummie after the pilot, a Chinese Cockney, an Orthodox London Jew, an alcoholic and racist ex-officer of the Indian Army, a racist Australian bookies clerk, and a Muslim Arab who speaks with a Scottish accent as a result of working at the Peckham branch of the Bank of Scotland. With the exception of a couple of minor characters, I think Frank Carson is the only performer portraying his own nationality and not adopting an accent. Of course, Milligan and Bird appear in brownface as they're playing Asian characters, and this did not ring any alarm bells at the BBC. While the UK was not as tolerant of non-white immigrants in the 1970s, surely the past experience with the backlash from Milligan's multicultural curry and chips would have elicited more caution before basically repeating the same mistakes again. Again, as with curry and chips, it was claimed the show was written with the intent to ridicule discrimination and highlight the ignorance behind such issues. However, a survey had found that 83% of Curry and Chips viewers' attitudes towards coloured people remained apathetic and unchanged. On a couple of occasions, Frank Carson's character rebuked someone for using racially insulting language, but then compounded it by making a racially derogatory remark about the person he was defending. Perhaps because I'm more familiar with Spike Milligan in shows like his sketch series Q5, some of the scenes felt like sketches. If it wasn't for the blackface, sexism and racism, a couple of the scenes would have made for good Q5 sketches. At the end of one scene in the pilot, Milligan and Bird both turn and mug at the camera, like Milligan often did at the end of a Q5 sketch. Milligan and Bird corpse on a few occasions. I'm going to assume retakes were not even considered. In one scene, Milligan accidentally spills a cup of tea on Bird, who brilliantly ad-libs, "We're going to do it in the following manner, after you've gone to the dry cleaners." I have seen the pilot and 3 other episodes. I chose not to watch the other 3 episodes. Every scene is peppered with so much racist, sexist and homophobic language, it was just giving me a headache. Even for the period, the production values were poor, the plots were weak, and clearly no one knew how to write the ending for an episode. The show was met with universal outrage for its regrettable implications and at times outright racism. However, just as many people complained that the show was just not funny. Despite an extensive search of newspaper archives, I found almost nothing contemporaneous written about The Melting Pot, so I've had to rely on some user reviews on the IMDb website. In June 1975, Clive James reviewed The Melting Pot for The Observer. It was, he wrote, the worst thing to happen to race relations since Pharaoh went sour on the Israelites. Androids1 wrote, "How did this get made by the BBC? It's offensive to black, Muslim, Irish, Jewish, Arabic, German, Chinese, Australian, gay, disabled and dwarfs, along with racist speak including the N-word amongst other racist terms. It's baffling how the BBC filmed not only a pilot, but then went back and commissioned a 6-episode series. Sleeping Dragon wrote Frank Carson and several other well-known faces, but they're all wasted here. None of them can string a laugh together. I'm not someone that's easily offended, but after enduring 7 episodes, I honestly just came away thinking I'd wasted the best part of 3 hours. Shade Grenade wrote, it beggars belief that the BBC could commission and film this and finally decide to shelve it. One viewer claimed that Milligan was probably the least racist comedian on television. How could an Irishman born in India with an inherent disconnect with British society fail to be able to point it all out? Except that while Milligan was born in India, this was in the area still directly administered by the United Kingdom, the British Raj. So, as he was white, he was brought up to believe white people were superior. According to Milligan's former agent and manager, Norma Farnes, throughout the 1960s, Milligan was seriously concerned about the wave of immigrants from India and Pakistan. He argued one day in the future England would become a melting pot, its native culture submerged until it became so diluted it would disappear forever. So Milligan's fears of a future melting pot manifested in his eponymous film, echoing those feelings. A series of 6 episodes was commissioned and produced in 1976, but those episodes have never been broadcast. A couple of the actors changed between the pilot and episode 1 of the commissioned series. The series was thought to be lost apart from a brief clip in a fan-made showreel of Spike Milligan's filmography on YouTube. However, a full copy of the pilot episode of The Melting Pot was known to exist in the BBC archives as a low-band U-matic video recording, and as it turns out, archived copies of the remaining episodes also exist in some form as well. At some point, someone with access to the BBC archives uploaded copies of all 7 episodes to the Internet Archive website, but they've since been deleted. The Melting Pot occasionally surfaces on YouTube, but is quickly removed. Milligan felt the show had been harshly treated. The only material from the unbroadcast episodes that has been publicly available were the scripts, which were published in a book in 1983. Milligan also based parts of his novel The Loony on the scripts. I'm not sure how anyone could get further than writing the title of this show without realising that it was not going to go down well. Part of the premise of Hi Honey, I'm Home was reasonably well conceived. Make a spoof of a 1950s American sitcom, but making the main characters Hitler and his wife with a Jewish family next door prompts a lot of questions. Hi Honey, I'm Home was set in pre-war Berlin, when the West knew what Hitler was doing, but he'd not exposed his full intentions yet. It was written by Jeff Atkinson, who had spent his career writing for some of British television's most celebrated comedy shows. From The Two Ronnies to Spitting Image. He suggested the show to independent production company Noelgay Television, and they commissioned a pilot that was filmed in May 1990. The thinking behind the show was, how do you deal with a bully? Atkinson's answer was to turn Hitler into a joke, and who better to do that than the Jewish couple next door? Atkinson decided to parody Hitler and make the show in the style of an American 1950s sitcom. The opening caption cards suggest the audience is watching lost tapes that were found in a Burbank backlot. So Hitler has a broad New York accent and is the stereotypical sitcom man of the house, except that invading Poland with his fascist troops is higher on his priorities than typical sitcom domesticity. It is never made clear whether the Hitler character is aware of the identity of his neighbours. They are just an annoyance to him. At the time, British satellite broadcasting only had 175,000 subscribers, and only a limited number of those would have seen the show on BSB's Galaxy channel on the 30th of September 1990. The British have a long-established affection for transgressive comedy takes on Hitler. Spike Milligan parodied Hitler, and Freddie Starr lampooned him in a ridiculous costume. John Cleese had several pokes at him in Monty Python and in Fawlty Towers as a goose-stepping caricature. The BBC sitcom series Hello Hello, set in occupied France, mocked Nazis for 10 years to great acclaim. The reason I think the parodies by Spike Milligan, Freddie Starr and John Cleese succeeded at ridiculing Hitler was the costumes. Milligan's costume was usually low effort. Starr was conventional until you got to the white shorts and turned down wellies. And the Cleese Hitler rode a bicycle, made his speeches through a megaphone and did his classic goose-step silly walk. The "Heil honey, I'm home" Hitler was not a caricature. As a parody of 1950s American sitcoms, the pilot works. Cheesy titles and title music, the lead actors entering to automatic applause. But that was probably partly what let the show down. The 1950s sitcom setting is perfect, and a lot of time Hitler is shown as the hapless sitcom husband. Not much time is spent on satirising and making him look a fool. Although at no time does Hitler threaten his neighbours, the Goldensteins. The titles were changed to an animated sequence after the pilot. I've read the script for another episode when Hitler's brother Ziggy comes to visit. There are more topical pre-war references. At one point, not mentioning if he knows the Goldensteins are Jewish, Hitler says, "What do I want to listen to the Goldensteins for? Why should I want to eavesdrop on my neighbours, unless it's to gain vital military information in readiness for all-out war against them?" That's just about as menacing as he gets. I'm not sure that belittles the Hitler character. It seems that most of the outcry came from the publicity before the show, rather than from people who actually watched it when it aired. Writer Jeff Atkinson said, "The Jewish Chronicle were up in arms about it, but I said, you haven't seen it yet as it hasn't been screened. We're not praising Hitler, we're ridiculing him." On the 24th of August 1990, it was reported in the press that Secretary General of the Board of Deputies of British Jews said, "We're against any trivialisation of the Second World War, Hitler or the Holocaust, and this certainly trivialises those things. It's very distasteful." Again, the show had not yet been aired. A lot of critics expressed views, but from some comments it's clear that many did not research the concept and why it disappeared from television screens. In her 1992 book, Zap, A Brief History of Television, historian Marion Calabro described the show as perhaps the world's most tasteless situation comedy. In 2013, Metro included the show in its list of 10 sitcoms even worse than The Right Way, but claimed it was yanked off the air after the first episode, rather than not surviving the Sky takeover of BSB. Ben Ricketts of Curious British Telly said in 2013, "It's been shown time and time again that to be offended by a television show you don't actually have to watch it. Busybodies would surely have thought all their Christmases had come at once when they heard that a comedy about Hitler had aired." In 2016, The Telegraph put Heil Honey at number 8 in their list of the 10 worst British sitcoms ever made. They observed that the series was immediately attacked for trivialising Nazism. On his website, Just Some Random Thoughts, John R. Lovett wrote in 2017, "Heil Honey, I'm Home was wrong on every level, and however bad modern one-joke sitcoms can be, none are as bad as Heil Honey, I'm Home." In 2021, Desperate Living wrote, "It's a fascinating example of how a project has been wildly misinterpreted and mythologised, usually by people who simply follow the narrative set out by other critics." The show is widely misreported as being cancelled after only one episode. In reality, only the pilot had been broadcast. The series was not intended to air until late 1991. It's quite normal for pilot episodes not to be made public, but BSB wanted to preview its new shows to try and gain more subscribers. It was only after the pilot was shown that work started on a series, with some changes made, which is typical after any pilot. Some sources claim there were to be 16 episodes, but the edit clocks of the completed episodes clearly show there were only due to be 7 episodes, which is typical for a British sitcom. Production was not stopped as a result of any outcry or offence, but because after the takeover of BSB by Rupert Murdoch's Sky Television in November 1990, Sky made a commercial decision to focus on US-based comedies rather than homegrown shows, so the show was scrapped. It is only with the benefit of actual hindsight that the show can be assessed, and who better to do that than the independent, non-profit, forward independent Jewish News. Their culture reporter PJ Grisar wrote a very detailed article published on the 30th of September 2020, exactly 30 years after the broadcast. Following a detailed interview with Jeff Atkinson, the article concluded that "Heil Honey, I'm Home" is what we would now call problematic. As an example of the still prevalent anti-Semitism, he referred to the controversy over grime artist Wiley's anti-Semitic rant on Twitter the week before the article. Grisar asked Atkinson, "Is there also a problem with not doing a comedy about Hitler?" To which Atkinson replied, "There's nothing that destroys somebody like making them into a laughingstock. Would Hitler have enjoyed Heil Honey? No, that's not a bad yardstick." The BBC has become one of the most recognised and valued media brands around the world thanks to its programmes. On the 9th of February 2003, a new channel, BBC Three, was launched. BBC Three aimed to cater for 24 to 35-year-olds with innovative and award-winning programmes from comedy to serious documentaries, but not without generating some controversy along the way. I'm not sure they expected the controversy to start even before any programmes had aired. Ahead of the launch, the BBC promoted some of the new shows, including Snog, Marry, Avoid, Gavin and Stacey, and the animated sitcom Popetown. Popetown is a 10-part animated sitcom that looks at the daily irritations that exist in any workplace, except this workplace is the Vatican and the boss happens to be the Pope. The Pope character is voiced by Ruby Wax and Jerry Hall is a nun. They are joined by a who's who of television comedy stars including Bob Mortimer and Matt Lucas. It was due to air in 2004. Who could object to a cartoon sitcom featuring corrupt cardinals and an elderly pope on a pogo stick? Well, members of the Roman Catholic Church had a few things to say and petitioned the government to intervene. In a debate on the 7th of July 2003, they claimed that if the BBC allowed the screening of Popetown, it would offend many practising members of the Roman Catholic faith. They considered that to have Ruby Wax providing the voice of a senile pope, albeit as a cartoon character, is in extremely poor taste and offends against the code of propriety that the BBC ought to allow. The debate provided an opportunity for MPs to express their views and concerns about the show, and for the government to respond. However, the outcome of the debate was largely symbolic. While the government acknowledged the concerns of the petitioners, they ultimately upheld the right of the BBC to produce and broadcast content even if it was controversial or offensive to some viewers. So, problem over then? No, not really. On the 9th of February 2004, John Plunkett reported in The Guardian that the BBC had received thousands of complaints about Popetown from viewers angry at the portrayal of a corrupt Roman Catholic Church. He quoted an unnamed source as saying it is causing huge ructions within the BBC. There is no rush to get it out. Plunkett added that an unnamed spokeswoman said the name may now be changed to Holy Smoke. There is never going to be a good time to put this out, said another anonymous source close to the programme. The whole point about these complaints is that none of the people making them have seen the scripts, but if they did, they would be hugely upset. The article quoted a spokeswoman saying that the programme was still in production and nowhere near a transmission date yet. She said, "We're constantly talking to various people as we do about all our programmes. It was commissioned an awfully long time ago and is still in the pipeline. Popetown is only a working title. We will take on board what people say." Clifford Longley, a prominent British Catholic journalist and commentator, accused the BBC of trying to incite ill feeling towards the 6 million Catholics in the country. The Archbishop of Glasgow at the time, Mario Conti, criticised the BBC for its rudeness and prejudice in its coverage of the Roman Catholic Church. He said the corporation was guilty of encouraging a tabloid culture and expressed particular concern about Popetown. 7 months later, Stuart Murphy, controller of BBC Three, said that, after a lot of consideration and consultation, balancing the creative risk with the potential offence to some parts of the audience, we have decided not to transmit the programme. Despite all of the creative energy that has gone into this project and the best efforts of everyone involved, the comic impact of the delivered series does not outweigh the potential offence it will cause. Janet Bennett, director of television, said, Risk-taking, however, is a key part of the role of BBC Three, and Stewart and the channel will continue to break new ground in the notoriously difficult area of comedy. The show was made for BBC Three by Channel X with French TV company Mojam La Télévision. Even the Channel X website describes Popetown as the most controversial animated comedy series ever made. Alan Mark, managing director of Channel X, said in a statement, "I'm incredibly disappointed about this decision as I am very proud of this project and all the talent involved, but I understand the world has changed since the series was originally commissioned 3 years ago and sympathise with the difficult decision the BBC has had to make." The Catholic Bishops' Conference of England and Wales welcomed the decision to withdraw the programme. The Right Reverend Crispian Hollis, Bishop of Portsmouth and spokesman for the conference, said, "I am delighted that this has been withdrawn. It was obviously going to be a controversial programme which would have caused offence, not least among the Catholic community who hold the person of the Holy Father in the highest regard and affection." So, that was it then. Of course not. Popetown's associate producer Stacey Herbert expressed her ire over what she described as the farcical story of how the BBC bowed to religious pressure in an article in New Humanist magazine. She claimed, "As the associate producer of Popetown, I can promise the scripts were hilarious." She went on to discuss how spokespersons for the church stated the BBC was somehow taking advantage of the unfortunate situation of the Catholic Church, and that none of the statements clarified what that situation was. Herbert pondered it was due to accusations of children abused by some of the rogue priests in America, or investigations into the death of the Vatican's banker Roberto Calvi, or a Catholic priest found guilty of using the Vatican bank to launder stolen money, or the court proceedings to recover stolen art and money hidden in the Vatican bank, or allegations of complicity of the Catholic Church in the Rwandan genocide, or the battle with the Third World archbishops who are against the Pope's endorsement of genetically modified foods. Herbert said it's difficult to see how any of these situations might have been exacerbated by Popetown. But if comedy is catharsis, then based on the list of troubles above, the Catholic Church is in real need of some laughter. All was not lost. The BBC had spent in the region of £1.3 million on the project, so offered it to international television broadcasters. The premiere screened on New Zealand's C4 television network on the 8th of June 2005. C4, a mostly music video station, said on its website that Popetown is an insanely funny and politically incorrect cartoon. Director of Communications for the New Zealand Catholic Church, Lindsay Freer, said, "On the face of it, it looks as though it's going to be offensive, but I can't really say that without having seen it. There is a very fine line between what is funny and what is offensive." C4 station manager Andrew Susterman said the programme was satire and no more offensive than Father Ted, The Vicar of Dibley, or Monty Python's Life of Brian. "We've put it to our appraisers and they've rated it as PGR, Parent Guidance Recommended. The deal is when people watch it they realise it's not that bad." It was also aired on several MTV channels, including MTV Germany, MTV Latin America and MTV Latvia, MTV Estonia and Twice 2 channel in Russia. When the show premiered on MTV in Germany, it was accompanied by a deliberately provocative advertising campaign. It sparked such a controversy that Christian groups and politicians called for a ban of the show before one single episode aired. Bishops from Pope Benedict XVI's home state of Bavaria said that the satirical series is insulting to Catholics and filed a legal injunction which was rejected by the court in Munich. MTV said it had been prepared for resistance to Popetown but was surprised at the extent of the backlash from the Catholic Church. The German TV ratings board FSF couldn't find any reason for censorship and allowed the cartoon to air complete and uncut at an appropriate time. Despite never being shown on British television, it was released on DVD in the UK by Revolver Entertainment in September 2005, in Australia by Roadshow Entertainment and in Germany by Polyband Medion GmbH. As the show was not broadcast in the UK, the only reviews are of the commercial DVD release, which might be edited differently than was originally intended for television broadcast. All I can say with any certainty is the reviews are mixed. The quality of the animation was praised. One reviewer says it's nowhere near the comedy calibre of The Simpsons. Another said Ruby Wax was excellent as the Pope, but elsewhere it was said that Ruby Wax is truly obnoxious in this, the constant screaming wears thin. On the question of causing offence, one person said the satire is marginally less scathing than Father Ted, and another remarked that it's incredibly mild. One reviewer commented that none of those scandals around the Catholic Church were referenced. So, a mixed bag, but you can make your own mind up just how funny a pogoing Pope is. While programme makers want to find new settings and ideas for sitcoms, the failure to predict the potential for negative reaction to their sometimes revolutionary ideas is still surprising. Let me know your thoughts on these controversial comedies in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more nostalgic television content. In the next video, I'm looking at 3 more controversial sitcoms that were all set in schools. Thanks for watching.